Okay, I guess we can start. Buon pomeriggio, good afternoon, and ben ritrovati. Welcome back to our online event. Last time we were at La Scala, and today we are at La Fenice di Venezia. So, welcome everyone. We hope that this day's life is not too hard on you, and that you and your family are in good health, and that you can enjoy aspects of life that before were neglected for lack of time. We know that our students are enjoying our online classes, and our teachers appreciate your company on Zoom. Spring enrollment is going well, and soon you will have a summer schedule online. This summer, we are going to offer a wide range of classes, the continuation of spring and also new courses. For example, listening to music with Maestro Felicia Toscano, director of our School of Music. And this is a course to learn about the different musical genres, the opera, the ballet, the symphony, and the solo concert, and to develop a personal ear critic. And the second hour can be dedicated to grammar and conversation, depending on the interests of the students. Also, we will have cultural courses in English, like archaeology, art of Renaissance, discover regions of Italy, Latin, and so on. So stay tuned and share the class information with your friends and family from all over the United States, and not only. This is your chance to be able to attend the class in their company online, connected with all of us. So share Facebook or through email. Claudia, buon pomeriggio. Do you want to say hi and give some instructions to our audience?
Yes, thank you, Francesca. Buon pomeriggio to everybody. Thank you so much for your interest. So just a quick thing. So in order to not have any problem with background noises, I will have to mute everyone. Please don't take this personally. It's just for the quality of the video and of the event. And for the same reason, I will have to stop the video of everyone so that we don't have too much data going on, and we can keep a fast connection. So thank you for being here and enjoy this event.
Yeah, today's event will also be on YouTube channel, like last one. It's recorded, and you can see the link in our events page, social meeting. So today we talk about Claudio Monteverdi, the father of opera, and the president of the Italian Cultural Society Board of Directors, David Flexman, will be the main speaker. 2 words about David. David Flexman joined the Italian Cultural Society and our language courses in 2015. He's currently a student of Professor Annalise Morani Brodi in the Advanced Grammar and Conversation class and literature class that now focuses on Torquato Tasso. David has an MA in mathematical logic from the Johns Hopkins University, and after a long and successful career in the information technology field, he has recently been very involved with choral music, and he sings for the Choral Arts Society of Washington, D.C., and with the Georgetown Chorale. David is a member of the board of these 2 organizations. David also teaches music in the OLLI program at American University. Welcome, David Flexman.
Thank you, Francesca. Glad to be here, and we'll get started with our discussion in a little while, but why don't you now introduce Annalise?
Yeah, so let's introduce Professor Annalise Morani Brodi. Received her laurea in comparative literature at the University of Bologna, and her master degrees and PhD in Italian literature from Johns Hopkins University. She then went on teaching as a faculty member at various college institutions, joining George Washington University in St. Louis in 2005, where she taught Italian language, literature, cinema at all levels. She also served as a language coordinator until 2018. She developed and taught online language courses as a winner of a grant in language and technology research. Her main research interest is in medieval Italian literature, and in particular in literature and ethics. She published papers on Petrarch and Boccaccio. She presented at numerous conferences. And Annalise is also a passionate yoga practitioner and a certified teacher. And myself, I'm one of her students in our yoga class in Italian and in literature. Annalise also joined recently our board of directors, and she's a good advisor of the Italian language program. Welcome, Annalise, and thank you for your time today and for this event with us.
Thank you so much, Francesca, and thanks everybody for being here.
All right. Well, so just in addition to the words of instruction that Claudia gave us, let me just say that, because we're going to try to keep people muted most of the time, feel free to use the chat function to send me any questions that you might have or comments. At the end, we will try to open it up and see how that goes. We've got something like 63 people connected. So if we unmute everybody, it can go well or not so well. We'll see how that goes. So I'm going to go into screen share mode, and we'll start the talk. So give me just a second to get my screen going here. Are talking about Claudio Monteverdi. Let me I got one more thing here. Okay. And I entitled this Claudio Monteverdi, the father of opera. And, we're only going to scratch the surface of Claudio Monteverdi today. Richard Taruskin, who wrote the 5-volume history of Western music, has an entire chapter devoted to Monteverdi, where he calls it something like, opera from Monteverdi to Monteverdi. And it's a very interesting read. But we're going to touch on a little bit of Monteverdi today. So Monteverdi, I assume that almost everybody knows something about Claudio Monteverdi. He lived from May of 1567 to November of 1643. He was one of the greatest composers of all time. He's definitely one of my very favorite composers. He composed both sacred and secular music. Some of you may know his Vespers of 1610 that, in fact, Choral Arts Society of Washington, for which I sing, performed at the Kennedy Center a couple years ago. But he is probably better known for his secular music. And most people who know him only a little bit will know him for his tremendous output of madrigals. Madrigals, of course, are sort of polyphonic, typically a cappella pieces, typically that will set poetry to music. They originated really in the 1520s in Italy and reached their height later on. Somebody's been writing on the screen, I'm not sure who, but whoever's writing on the screen, please stop. Okay, and I'm going to give you a little taste of Monteverdi's madrigals with one of his most famous ones. So a lot of Monteverdi's work was lost. Fortunately, we have a lot of it, but there was much that was lost. And he wrote an opera called L'Arianna that was lost, although a piece of it called Lamento d'Ariadne has survived. And this is from that particular section. It's a madrigal called Lasciatemi morire. And the words go like this: Lasciatemi morire, e che volete che mi conforte in così dura sorte, in così gran martire, lasciatemi morire. So since this is an adult program, I will let everybody know that frequently in Italian music, the word morire has the sense of the French la petite mort, and it does in this particular madrigal. So here's a performance of it by Les Arts Florissants, in fact, a French group, and you'll see just on this first madrigal, there are some French subtitles.
Così dura sorte, così
Okay.
Schermo, perhaps I can say 2 words while David can go back about the madrigal, the composition of the madrigal. So what is a madrigal? So the madrigal was already used, of course, by Petrarch in the Middle Ages, and it was the secular composition that was set to be in music, of course. It was set to be sung, and as opposed to the religious composition, but it does change. When Petrarch was writing it, the metrical structure was a bit different. It was made by tercets of endecasyllable and by 2 distichi, 1 or 2 distichi, final distichi, while when we get to Claudio Monteverdi, it is alternating settenari, so 7 syllable verses to endecasyllable, and its structure is a little bit more mobile to accommodate, of course, this more fluidity of music and song, and become also part of the operetta or opera.
Okay.
So, go ahead, sorry.
All right, I finally, there's a slight bug in Zoom that took me a while to get around. Okay, so here we go. All right, so Monteverdi was born in Cremona in the north of Italy. As you can see from the map, sort of between Milano and Verona. At the time, Cremona was under the jurisdiction of Milan, which was a Spanish possession at the time. So technically, Monteverdi was a Spanish subject, but of course, Italian completely. Cremona was close to the border of the Republic of Venice and the lands controlled by Mantua, where he later established his career. He probably received his early musical training at Cremona Cathedral. There was a maestro there named Ingegneri, who he later credits with giving him a firm foundation in music. And by age 15, he had published a set of songs called Sacre Cantiunculae that were actually issued in Venice in 1582. So, and a few years later, he begins the publication of a series of books of madrigals. In book 1 of his madrigals that dates from 1587, we can get a sense for his style, which evolved during the course of his composition from his earliest to his latest songs in the book. And here's a madrigal that's entitled Chiami la vita mia nel tuo bel nome. And it's an interesting, there's probably a little play on words concealed in there, because the Chiami la vita probably encompasses the name of the woman that he was in love with at the time, Camilla. So he's Camilla, my life, that I love my life. And here's that one. Oh, and here we got writing again. I don't know why. Well, we have somebody who's writing on our screen, which I don't understand. Okay, well. Let's start to share again. Okay. So early on in his career, he demonstrated a fondness for the great poet Torquato Tasso. And Annalisa is going to tell us much more about Tasso in a bit. So Tasso was one of the most influential poets in Italian history. He was the author of Gerusalemme Liberata, which is in fact his great epic poem that we're reading right now with Annalisa in her literature class. But at the end of book one, he sets a love poem of Tasso. So Tasso was involved in sort of a love poem battle with a poet named Giovanni Battista Guarini. And this is the third, the second response to Guarini. And here he's talking about my desire burns and for you. Scorn and love will make vain the haughty sound of your capricious words. So you'll see now his style late at the end of this book one has already evolved. It's become much more polyphonic and urgent. So you can already see the evolution of his style there. And then we're going to play one more bit of, so he moves to Mantua. He enters the service of Duke Vincenzo I Gonzaga of Mantua. There is the Duke in all his finery. So Vincenzo was a notable patron of the arts. He also employed the famous painter Peter Paul Rubens. And he was interested in turning Mantua into a cultural capital. There's a story that he tried to hire Galileo. Galileo paid a visit to him in Mantua, and apparently they negotiated and couldn't reach a deal, and he sent Galileo away with some parting gifts. But so finally, in 1602, Monteverdi is appointed master of music, and he dedicates his third book of madrigals to the Duke. And here's a really interesting offering from the third book, Va-te-ne pur crudel. And it's a very plaintive cry. The Va-te-ne pur crudel con quella pace che lascia a me va-te-ne iniquo omai is go, cruel, go with such peace, such rest, such joy, such comfort as thou leavest me here. And you'll hear again the evolution of his style here.
Va-te-ne pur crudel con va-te-ne pur crudel va-te-ne pur crudel con la pace che lascia me va-te-ne va-te-ne quel stai lo spirito
So Monteverdi famously was in a little bit of a battle over style. He had invented a new style that he called the seconda pratica, and it involved a lot more dissonance that you may have heard in some of those madrigals. So in 1607, Vincenzo's heir Francesco, who was soon to become in 1612 Duke Francesco, commissions a work based on a libretto by Alessandro Striggio called L'Orfeo. So Striggio himself was a fine young musician, the son of a composer in Vincenzo's court. Striggio has set the famous Orfeo legend, and we'll ask Annalisa in a moment to talk more about that. Taruskin, who I mentioned earlier, has some interesting comments about this. He says, one important aspect of the aesthetics, which is a fancy word which basically means the process of artistic creation, of early dramatic music was its descent in part from 16th century Florentine court spectacles known as intermedii. All the earliest favole in musica were fashioned to adorn the same kind of North Italian court festivities, flattering the assemblages of, quote, renowned heroes, blood royal of kings, who were privileged to hear them, potentates, quote, of whom fame tells glorious deeds, though falling short of truth, as we'll hear La Musica in Orfeo herself put it in the prologue, which we'll be playing very soon. Orfeo was first performed during the carnival season of 1607 to, in fact, celebrate Francesco Gonzaga. So the myth of Orfeo, Orpheus, has had many tellings over the millennia. In Virgil's telling, Eurydice dies a second time when Orfeo looks back at her as they are ascending from Hades. In Striggio's libretto, the typical ending that Orfeo is killed by angry women, which we'll come to later, is replaced by his being given a celestial home. The moral of the story for the young prince was, only he who can subdue his passions with reason is worthy of reward. So one of the points that Taruskin makes here is that up until this time, most of these musical fables were written to flatter princes, and this was no exception. This was definitely written to flatter Duke Vincenzo and his son Francesco. And in fact, when you get to the moral of Orfeo, you really hear that coming through quite clearly. So we're going to go now to the prologue. Yes, I'm going to give the prologue, and then I'm going to ask Annalisa to talk about it. So Orfeo, I want to start with the prologue, the overture to Orfeo and the prologue, in which you'll see La Musica takes the stage. This production from Barcelona by Jordi Savall is stunningly beautiful and well done. And I'm going to let you drink in this overture and the beginning of La Musica's prologue, in which she sings some of these words that we heard from Taruskin. She'll say, di cui narra la fama eccelsi pregi, ne giunge al ver, perché è troppo alto il segno. So it doesn't quite reach the truth, because that's too high of a mark to achieve for my tale. So let's now hear Jordi Savall presenting the overture and the prologue to Orfeo by Claudio Monteverdi.
ciel si pregi di giunge al vir, perché troppo alto il segno.
Okay, so you hear her singing there, and she does issue the lines, the flattering lines. Glorious, I come to you, glorious heroes, noble bloodline of rulers, of whom fame relates high praise. So she's flattering the Duke and the Prince. So the key characters, and I'm going to turn this over for a moment to Annalisa, but they are Orfeo, the son of Apollo, Eurydice, who is the most beautiful and perfect of women, Plutone, the god of the underworld, who had abducted Proserpina. You see on the right of the screen, you see the famous statue done by Bernini of the rape of Proserpina. But Annalisa, can you just give us some background on Orfeo and these characters?
Yes, well, Orpheus has been one of the great myths of antiquity, which were passed on the Renaissance, and not just only the Renaissance. Dante, for example, refers to Orpheus in the Convivio to explain the different layers of readings of the Divine Comedy, and you know, like the literal, the moral, the allegorical, and the anagogical. And Orpheus is not just the master of music, but it comes also along as the master of poetry. Orpheus is the one that becomes the vate, the poets of poets, so to speak, and he leads. He's a leader, basically, and as such he is followed. And you know, Orpheus, when Dante talks about Orpheus, for example, he says that Orpheus was so skilled that he turned the beast, the wild beast, and he makes them meek, which, you know, we need to read it as the educational intent of poetry that can in fact tame cruel men and make them into a virtuous one, which was, as a matter of fact, the highest belief of Dante. No, poetry has to tell the truth. So here, of course, of the story of Orpheus, I think all of you know it. Orpheus is he's married to Eurydice. Eurydice is bitten by a poisonous snake and dies, but Orpheus does not want to be won by death. He does not accept defeat, and he undertakes this journey to the underworld to free her, knowing and believing in the power of poetry. And he does so, and he pleads with Pluto and Proserpina, and he is able to move them. Of course, his poetry is so compelling and so powerful that, in fact, if for a moment he's able to defeat death, because Pluto grants him to take Eurydice back onto Earth, onto life, as long as he does not look backwards while Eurydice is following him all the way until they get out of the underworld. Now, of course, Orpheus can't resist. He wants to check if that's really true. And the moment that he turns his head to see if Eurydice was following him, he loses her forever.
And we will play some of those scenes coming up. All right, thank you. That was wonderful. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to go to a scene in which Orfeo is singing about the wonderful Eurydice. He calls her Rosa del ciel, vita del mondo, e degna prole di lui che l'universo affrena. So she's the rose of heaven, life of the world, worthy heir of him who holds the universe in sway. And you'll see he's saying there's a facilissimo il punto. It's his happiest moment. And then she will come on and she will join in. Oh, and it's interesting because she says, I will not say that in your joy, Orfeo, is my joy, for no longer do I possess my own heart. It is with you in the company of love. And so let's listen to these two arias, these beautiful arias. I will just say that the tenor, this is sort of a barytenor role, which means it's low tenor or very high baritone, is a wonderful singer named Furio Zanassi. And Eurydice is played by the daughter of Jordi Savall. Her name is Ariana Savall, and she is just perfect for the role. You'll see momentarily.
Rosa del ciel, vita del mondo, e degna prole di lui che l'universo affrena. Sol che il tutto circondi e il tutto annui, dagli stellanti giri dimmi, vedestu mai di me più lieta e fortunato amante? Fu ben felice il giorno mio ben, che pria ti vidi, e più felice l'ora che per te sospirai, poiché il mio sospirar tu sospirasti. Felicissimo il punto che la candida mano, regno di pura fede, a me porgesti. Se tanti cori avessi quant'occhi al cielo eterno, e quante chiome an questi con gli ameni il verde maggio, tutti colmi sarino e traboccanti di quel piacer che oggi mi fa
La gioia piena
Okay, so we have the perfectly delighted, happy couple. Everything is going as well as it possibly could in their lives. And then, so now Monteverdi, and this is one of the ways in which Monteverdi becomes sort of the father of modern opera. He uses the chorus, actually in a way not unlike the way the ancient Greeks would have the chorus in their plays, to frequently advance the action or give important morals to the story. And we're going to hear the chorus now singing about Oggi felice tanto che nulla è più che da bramar gli avanzi. Today he is so happy that there is nothing more for him to wish for. And let's hear the chorus deliver that. Forward in the interest of time. So we have Orfeo now has been established as the happiest man on earth and Eurydice as the happiest woman on earth. But, and we have one more little moment in which Orfeo now sings about how happy he is, in which he sings that Sol per te, bella Eurydice, benedico il mio tormento, dopo il duol vie più contento, dopo il mal vie più felice. So it's an interesting sentiment here that after sorrow, one is even more content. After woe, one is even happier. And we're going to hear a little bit of Orfeo singing that.
boschi ombrosi, ti ricordo boschi ombrosi, dei miei lunghi aspri tormenti, quando i sassi ai miei lamenti rispondean fatti pietosi. Vi ricordo boschi ombrosi, ti ricordo boschi ombrosi. Dite allor non vi sembrai, dite allor non vi sembrai più d'ogni altro sconsolato, or fortuna stil cangiato ed avvolto in festa e guai. Dite allor non vi sembrai più d'ogni altro sconsolato. Dissi già mesto e dolente, dissi già mesto e dolente, or gioisco e quegli affanni che sofferti ho per tant'anni fan più caro il ben presente. Dissi già mesto e dolente, dissi già mesto e dolente. Bella Euridice, sol per te, bella Euridice, benedico il mio tormento, dopo il duol vi è più contento, dopo il mal vi è più felice. Sol per te, bella Euridice, sol per te, bella Euridice.
Okay, so he's establishing that Euridice has delivered him from the torments that he'd been suffering, and he is the happiest man in the world. But suddenly, the messaggera appears with terrible news, and there's a little more that goes on before she appears, but we're going to go right to the messaggera with the bad news. Okay, so that was the part that Annalisa told us about, that poor Euridice was out collecting flowers for a garland, and she was bitten by a poisonous snake. So now we have Orfeo lamenting this. Tu sei morta mia vita, et io respiro. How can I still breathe now that you are dead?
Partito vita. Se da me partita per mai più non tornare ed io rimanga, no, che se i versi alcuna cosa ponno, n'andrò sicura più profondi abissi. A rivedere le stelle, o se ciò negherà mio pio destino, rimarrò teco in compagnia di morte.
So as Annalisa told us, it's not just the music. He says it's the verses. I'm going to attempt to win over Pluto with the beauty of my verses. And he's sworn himself to bring her back from the underworld. So he finds himself a guide to the underworld, Speranza, as opposed to Dante being guided by Virgil. But we do get a Dante quote here, which we will play for you. Speranza takes him to the gates of hell and sees the famous "Lasciate ogni speranza, o voi che entrate," abandon all hope, ye who enter.
Scritta col ferro in duro sasso, e li marreggia in sull'orribil soglia, in queste note il fiero senso esprime. Lasciate ogni speranza,
So we certainly know we're at the gates of hell. We've got the famous sign to tell us that. Okay, so now we're going to, so the chorus is going to give us another bit of moral of the story. The nulla impresa per uom si tenta invano. No undertaking by man is attempted in vain. It's an important point that's, again, being made by the librettist on behalf of the Duke towards his son. You know, have courage, attempt great things. And let's hear the chorus deliver that message. In this case, it's the coro di spiriti infernali. You'll see interesting lights.
Rendetemi il mio ben, rendetemi il mio ben, rendetemi il mio ben, tartare in
Okay. So once again, we have the chorus delivering one of the morals of the story to the young prince. So as Annalisa discussed before, he is able to charm Pluto and Proserpina, and then he sings, Orpheus sings a little bit, honoring his all-powerful lyre. I'm going to skip ahead from that and take you to the point where he and Eurydice are escaping from Hades, and in this particular libretto, he's wondering whether Eurydice is really following him, and he hears a noise and he turns around, and then all is lost.
Ma che odo, oimè lasso, salvan forse i miei danni, con tal fu innamorate per il mio bene, ed io il consento. L'eclissio in me v'oscura. Rottuare la legge, esse di grazia indegno.
So, rota hai la legge, se di grazia indegno. He's broken the laws of the underworld, and he's unworthy of the grace that Plutone had granted him and Eurydice. Just going to close a couple of windows here. Little housekeeping. Okay. So now we're going to go back to the chorus, and they have another important moral of the story for the young prince, which comes at the end of this little chorus. Degno d'eterna gloria, fia sol colui che avrà di sé vittoria. Worthy of eternal glory is the one who will have victory over himself. Well, let's hear some of that. Okay, now we're going to go on to, so in the next scene, Orpheus swears off women, and I'm gonna skip over this, but there's a great line in here where he basically says that For in your fair body you sheltered a fairer soul, lesser in pride, thus the more worthy of honor. Now other women are haughty and fickle, pitiless and changeable to their adorers, without judgment and noble thoughts. So he swears off women. And then in the historical telling, he's ripped to shreds for having done that. In this telling, his father saves the day. So we have his father, Apollo, comes down and tells him that he's going to deliver him. If he follows his father like a good son should, he will deliver him to eternal happiness and reward. And they sing a duet together as they ascend into heaven.
Le stelle vagheggerai le sue sembianze belle. Bendico tanto padre, sarei non degno figlio se non seguissi il tuo fedel consiglio.
So, important line. Of such a good father, I would not be a worthy son if I did not follow your trustworthy advice. So the chorus will get the last word. I'm not going to play that for you now because I want to move ahead. But the chorus does get to sing about how he who sows in sorrow reaps the fruit of all grace, which in fact is a theme that we hear again in Brahms in his famous Deutsches Requiem. So in February 1612, Vincenzo dies and succeeded by his now duly feted and informed son Francesco. With Mantua in decline, possibly because of the excesses of Vincenzo, Francesco undertakes cost-cutting and ends up firing Monteverdi, who returns penniless to Cremona. Francesco himself dies later in that year of smallpox. So the second son, who's the Cardinal, Ferdinando Gonzaga, takes over, but Monteverdi still is unable to return to Mantua. He successfully auditions to become the maestro of the Basilica of San Marco in Venice, where he is appointed in August of 1613. So while he's in Venice, he develops broad international fame. Visiting dignitaries note how wonderful his music is. There's a great quote from a Dutch dignitary who heard some of his music saying, "I heard the most perfect music I'd ever heard in my life. It was directed by the most famous Claudio Monteverdi, who was also the composer." During the period of 1614 to 1638, he publishes books 6, 7, and 8 of madrigals. And in book 8, which he entitles is about love and war, he sets many larger works sort of in the form of oratorio, including Il Combattimento di Tancredi and Clorinda. And I want to turn over now to Annalisa to talk a little bit about Gerusalemme Liberata e Tancredi.
So this is the canto, the 12th canto, the Gerusalemme Liberata. So the Gerusalemme Liberata was Tasso's most famous poem, of course not the only one he wrote, but the one that widely gave him fame, and he started writing it when he was quite little. I mean, he apparently was only 15, and he worked at it all his life until his very death, changing it subsequently with another title, The Jerusalem Conquered instead of Delivered. And in particular, in this canto, there are two main characters: a prince, a knight of Christian faith, Tancredi, and a woman supposedly of Islam faith, although that will be revealed not to be the truth in the end. And it's particularly interesting because it's a woman warrior. And now we have a whole set. So where does this woman warrior comes from? You know, what is possibly the inspiration of Tasso? Now, of course, we have a long history of women warrior. You know, the queen of the Amazon, Penthesilea, is killed by Achilles, who falls in love with her in the moment in which he realizes that she is a woman. He takes off her helmet and she sees this beautiful woman and he falls in love with her. We have Camilla in the Aeneid, the Virgin Camilla, and then we have in the Orlando Furioso, and before the Matteo Boiardo, we have a character of Marfisa, who is in Orlando Innamorato is a bit comical, and in Orlando Furioso becomes more serious, and the comic part is given to another woman warrior, Bradamante, who then converts and marries marries Rinaldo and becomes, of course, the one of the ancestors of the d'Este family, because both Ariosto, the author of the Orlando Furioso, and Tasso were operating some 30 years apart with first the Duke Alfonso first and then the Duke Alfonso II of d'Este. So they were both operating out of the Ferrara court. And there was another woman that might have inspired as well. This is a real woman, not a fantasy woman. It's not a Bradamante or a Marfisa, but it's a real woman. It's Caterina Sforza. Caterina Sforza was the daughter, the legitimate daughter of the Duke Giancaleazzo Sforza and his lover, and she was later married to Girolamo Oriario, who was the nephew of Pope Sixtus, and then she basically became the lady of Forlì, and she held Forlì until her husband died, and then she famously guided the resistance of Forlì when the Duca Valentino, the Pope of Alexander VI, the child of the Pope, of Alexander VI, Cesare Borgia, seized the fortress, and Caterina was later imprisoned, but she led the resistance until the very end. And so she was a real woman warrior who lived, she was born in 1463 and died in 1509. So she lived about 67 years before Tasso. So in this particular poem, we have Clorinda, who is in fact the woman that Tancredi loves, and she set out to, of course, burn these towers, this catapult that the Christians are building outside the walls of Jerusalem to prepare for the attack. But she's not wearing her own armors, because another female character Herminia, needed to go out of Jerusalem to fetch some herbs. It's a love triangle. She's also in love with Prince Tancredi. Of course, Tancredi is unaware that he's loved by Herminia, but Herminia goes out to fetch some herbs because she's afraid that if Tancredi gets wounded in the battle, she might be able to save him, or she hopes that she can save him. And so in order for herself to feel safe, she steals Clorinda's armors and she wears them, and with them she exits Jerusalem, hoping that those armors by herself will be the best defense, because everybody's afraid of Clorinda, as Clorinda is a very powerful warrior. And so Clorinda has to go fight with somebody else's armor, not her own. And so she, in this way, Tancredi does not recognize her. And so the two engage in a battle, and of course the battle ends badly for Clorinda, and Tancredi kills her. And only at the end, again, when she takes off the helmet, he realizes that he had killed the woman that he loved. So it's a little bit of a different twist from Penthesilea and Achilles. Achilles falls in love with Penthesilea after he killed her and after he takes off the helmet. Tancredi had already previously fallen in love with Clorinda, as he saw her first at the fountain while she was drinking, and she had taken off her helmet at the moment, and he sees her with this beautiful hair in the wind, and then she flees, but Tancredi loves her immediately. So who was Clorinda in the Jerusalem Liberata? Well, she was the son of the king and the queen of Ethiopia, but she was born white. And so her mother, to protect her, because she thought that her husband would kill her and the baby, thinking that she had been unfaithful because of course she was white, she gives her away basically. And although she has this servant promise her that he would raise her Christian, as the parents were Christian, she ends up in fact being raised a Muslim. And only at the very end, she, after having this premonition, this dream, that reveals her past, she decides that she wants to fulfill her parents' wishes, and she wants to become Christian, basically. And so Tancredi will administer the baptism to this woman on her moment of death, and thus she can be saved.
Okay, well, thank you. Excellent. All right, so we're going to listen to a little bit of Gerusalemme, actually, Il Combattimento di Tancredi e Clorinda now. And one of the things you'll notice in this, again, this is now later in Monteverdi's development, it's now much more operatic. So Orfeo from 1607, you still hear a lot of, the polyphonic madrigal sound in there, which, but here and it's sung in this case by Rolando Villazon, who's one of the most dramatic operatic tenors, and it works because the music can handle it. So here's the beginning where the story begins, and let's hear the narrator tell us about that.
Tancredi e Clorinda un uomo stima, vuol nell'armi provarla al paragone. Rispose, e guerra e morte. Guerra e morte avrai. Disse, io non rifiuto darla che se ne cerchi e firmo attenti. Ne vol Tancredi che abbia pie veduto il suo nemico usar cavallo, e scende, e impugna l'un altro il ferro acuto, e aguzza l'orgoglio in accende.
Okay, so this is they meet in night. They don't recognize each other. He asks her, you know, what is it that or she asks him, what does he want? And he says, I bring war. And she says, if you want war, I've got it. And now we're going to go on to the fight themselves. Neither shrunk back nor sought for better ground with fancy footwork.
Non schivar, non parar, non literar si voglia un costor, né qui destrezza parte, non noi colpior, fin dior, pie, dior, scar, si toglie l'ombra il flor, l'uso dell'arte, odi le spade, odi le spade, orribilmente darsi mezzo il ferro il piede d'arma non parte, sempre il piede fermo, sempre in moto, e scende dall'impare volta voto. Non ti rita lo sdegno.
So you hear how dramatic this is. He's depicting this fight to the death between these two people who, as it turns out, actually loved one another. And the music is as dramatic as it can possibly get. But we're going to move forward to now. They now take a step back from where they are.
L'un l'altro guarda e del suo corpo esangue sul pomo della spada appoggia il peso. Già dell'ultima stella il raggio langue sul primo albor che l'oriente acceso. Vede Tancredi da giotto che il sangue del suo nemico e se non tanto offeso ne gode e in suo perdice nostra follemente cogni aura di fortuna e stolle.
All right, so he sees that they're both seriously wounded. And he basically now he's saying to the fallen warrior, who are you? And she is still defiant. She says, I'm one of the brave heroes who burned your towers. And this is going to make him very angry and cause him to finish her off.
Nostra ventura è ben che qui si impieghi tanto valor dove il silenzio il copra, ma poi che sordria vien che ci nieghi e l'ore testimone glielo fra. Egoti, se fra l'armi alloco i prieghi, che il tuo nome, il tuo stato a me tu sopra, acciò che io sappia ho vinto vincitore, chi la mia morte o la mia vita onore. Rispose la feroce: intorno chiede quel conferoso di non fare palesi, o chiunque io ne sia, tu non si vedi ogni quei due che la grand'aria uccisi. Arse di sdegno quel parlar Tancredi
So she has established that she is not going to give any quarter. She's not going to tell him who she is. All she's going to do is maintain that she was the fierce warrior who burned down his towers. And of course, he kills her. And then we have this amazing scene, which many artists have depicted, as we see on the screen here, where he takes off her mask. She says to him first, "Friend, you have won." And then he takes off her helmet and realizes what he has done.
Mormorando un piccolo rigo, egli accorse e l'elmo in piedi nel fonte, e tutto messo al grande ufficio e pio. Tremar sentì la la fronte non conosciuta ancor sciolse e scoprì la vide e la conobbe e restò senza e voce e modo. Ai vista, ai conoscenza, non mori già che sue virtudi accolse.
Okay, so that's the moment in which he realizes what he has done. He's killed the woman that he loves. And all that is left is for her to die in peace. Let's just listen to a little bit of that.
Non mori già, che sue virtudi accolse tutto in quel punto, in guardia il cor le mise, e premendo il suo affanno con l'acqua che col ferro uccise.
as Annalisa explained, she's able to die in peace because she had a dream in which she realized that she was in fact a Christian by birth, and he baptizes her so she can die a Christian. Okay, in 1630, Mantua falls to an invasion by Habsburg armies. Mantua was also stricken by the plague, which eventually made its way to Venice. Monteverdi's younger brother, Giulio Cesare, died in this plague, and Monteverdi decides to retire. But 7 years later, when the first public opera house in Europe opens in San Cassiano, Monteverdi is lured out of retirement. He writes a few more operas. We'll save that story for another day. Okay, so I'm going to stop now and see if we have, we've run long, I apologize, but we'll see if we have any questions that people have, questions or comments. So if you will raise your hand or send a chat, we can unmute you and you can ask your question. Okay, I think we've we've worn people out a little bit by the length of our program. Apologize for that. So feel free to follow up with any questions that you might have.
Actually, I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
And I'm not an opera expert, although I do enjoy opera very much. And so what do you mean when you say that Monteverdi becomes more operatic from Orpheus to Jerusalem Liberata? What does it mean, more operatic?
So he puts more emphasis on the solo voice with the surrounding voices, you know, sort of supporting it, and puts more drama and emotion in it. So we already hear in Orfeo a certain amount of drama. I mean, certainly the aria where Orfeo is singing about the death of Eurydice is dripping with emotion, but it's still, you know, a fairly gentle kind of aria. Here we have Tancredi, the narrator talking about Tancredi in the person of Rolando Villazón, singing with as much emotion as you could possibly imagine. You couldn't imagine more passion in you know, an opera of Verdi. He's anticipating the kind of emotionality that you're going to hear in Verdi and Rossini and Puccini.
Okay, so it's an emotional content.
It's emotional content, but also the way in which the solo voice now stands out even more.
Okay.
From the
rest of the choir.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions? I guess the question I had for you, Annalisa, was why do you think that Monteverdi found this particular battle such an interesting one to set to music?
Well, I am not really sure, as I'm not an expert on Monteverdi. All I can say is that both Ludovico Ariosto and Tasso were incredibly popular at the time. When Goethe goes to Italy later, just to make you an idea, give you an idea of how in later centuries their popularity reached out, you know, he was amazed that a gondolier would be singing the Jerusalem Delivered, and in the countryside, the farmers would sing parts of the Orlando Furioso and as well as the Jerusalem Delivered. So I think it has to deal as much also with the popularity that Tasso, for example, enjoyed, as well as Orlando Furioso, because Vivaldi, for example, sets another opera on Orlando Furioso particularly. So we have these two poems that kind of compenetrate themselves and, you know, and are basically, as we would say, maybe with an anachronistic terms, the bestsellers of not only of their time, but even of the couple of centuries later.
All right, so we did get one question in the chat from Anne Camisa. She says, why is Monteverdi considered the father of opera? What did he do that was different? Well, it's, you know, it's sort of a complicated analysis. And of course, these things are never, you know, black and white. But Monteverdi did several things that are interesting. One is, of course, he had developed this new style of music already in his madrigals that allowed for the use of greater dissonance and chromaticism, which of course enabled him to express a wider range of emotions. He also, prior to him, most of the favole in music were mostly recitativo. So insofar as there was music at all, it was still pretty much the simple singing of lines to tell the story. Whereas Monteverdi now gives us this full-blown overture, and he gives us a full-blown chorus, and the chorus advances the action and has the moral of the story. So there are all kinds of important components that started to become standard in opera as we move forward in time. Also, as I mentioned before, he's now writing these arias that are much more dramatic and set apart from the rest of the music, but then supported by the choir and by the orchestra. So it's kind of a complex analysis. And even if you read Ruskin in the Oxford History of Music, his view is that Orfeo is still not fully yet their modern opera. It's not until the end of his time in Venice with L'Incoronazione di Poppea that we get really the modern opera. And that's why I say that's a story for another day. But by my lights, I think with Orfeo, you already see something that's very different from anything that came before it. The staging, the costumes, it has all the components. So thank you. John Wesley has something to add about the operaticness of Monteverdi's later style. Can we find John and unmute him? There he is. John, you're unmuted. What do you have to say about Monteverdi?
I wasn't going to make a comment. Must be the other John W.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Another John.
There's another John W. Is that your better half, John W?
John W is unmuted.
Okay.
So he can
Ah,
speak.
hello. Okay, now I'm unmuted. This is John Weeking. Hello,
Hi,
David.
Pickering. Okay, he was in our
Yeah.
class.
I know John.
Yes.
È vero. Maybe I can bounce this off. I wasn't here for the first half hour, so maybe, David, you pick up on Ruskin said something about this that you communicated already, but my impression is that Orfeo was written more for a limited court audience and was part of the movement to kind of revive some imitation of Greek drama, yes?
Yes, John, exactly right. Yeah, I did mention that, but thank you for bringing that back. Yes.
So I think that explains in part, you know, the combattimento and the coronazione and so forth were written for larger audiences, and expectations of drama had changed, I think, by the 1630s, 1640s.
Yeah, that's a great point. And in fact, yes, that Ruskin does make that point. In 1607, we're still writing at the pleasure of the court. You know, in this case, he's telling a story to the son of the Duke that is supposed to be instructive for the young prince by Il Combattimento, and then in Incoronazione di Poppea. We now have, you know, dramas that, in fact, the Incoronazione is a political drama that probably had some lesson to tell the public about what was going on in Venice in those days. Yes, thank you, John. That's a great point.
We also have Karen Garlick, who raised her hand.
Hey, Karen.
Karen.
Hi. Hello. Hi, David. Thank you so much, by the way, for the beautiful musical illustrations that go along with all of the narrative that you gave us. Do you happen to know by any chance, and you may not, whether the Il Combattimento is ever staged in some manner, or is it always performed in a cantata setting?
I believe I saw one with much greater staging, where they had swords and they were walking around the stage. I didn't use it because the singing wasn't as good. It's hard to beat Rolando Piazzone, but yes, it is staged sometimes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah.
And David, we also have a question from Ron in the chat.
Hi, Ron. Do we need to unmute him? Oh, it's in the chat. Basically, opera combines theater and music. Were there other forms of the same combination? So these favole di musica, which were the immediate predecessors, did a little bit of the combining of theater and music, but you know, were less complex. And as I mentioned before, the music tended to be simple singing of recitativo. So this does start with Monteverdi. You get this new flourishing of multi dimensions of the play combined with music that really was not something that we saw before. Yeah, John is, yeah. If I said that Villazone was Tancredi, he's not. He's the narrator. That's right.
Yeah, and then I see another question from Anne. How did the church receive this work?
Annalisa, do you have a thought about that? How did the church receive these works? Oh, wait, you're muted. I gotta unmute you.
Yes. I don't think the church, as I said before, oh no, I didn't say it in this section, but Tasso never had an issue with the Inquisition. It was more, I mean, it was rightly in his mind that the Inquisition might have picked up on some of the more deviant topics of his Jerusalem deliver, but the truth is that he never had a problem, and so I don't think that the church had an issue with the representation of the combattimento, the duel of Tancredi and Clorinda.
It wouldn't have been performed, Annalisa, in Rome, because in Rome, women were not allowed on stage.
Yeah.
There you go. So,
yeah.
But
Rome,
in general,
female operatic parts were performed by men, castrati or countertenors.
Yep.
There you go. So, but
elsewhere,
as a poem,
no problem.
But as a poem, it was definitely not one of those put in the index of the prohibited books. So there was nothing that stated that it should not have been made into music. Thanks, John.
Okay. Other questions or comments? All right. I think we're good. All right. So
we do have one more question, David.
What? Okay. Oh, Diane Seidel. An Italian equivalent of American musical theater.
Huh.
Yeah. Annalisa, you want to answer that?
No, we don't have a tradition of musical. This is typically American.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are, comic operas, which might be,
opera buffa is not the same,
it's
though.
not the same, but it's less, obviously less serious and dramatic than the real, the serious opera serie. But yeah, I don't think there is quite a tradition like American musical theater. Why did they didn't need it? They had opera.
Well, right. A lot of operas incorporated dancing as well. So
yeah, that's true. All right, so we have a parting gift, which Francesca will talk about. Before we go, I do want to say that we typically will ask at our social meetings if out of the kindness of your heart, you can see your way to give a donation to the Italian Cultural Society to support our social meetings. Please feel free to do so. You can find a donate button on our website on the social meeting page. We certainly appreciate any donations that will be made in support of the social meetings. We intend to continue to go forward with Zoom. We'll have some in the future that will be, that could involve some book readings. We could be doing some art museum tours. We'll have some more musical stories, but keep checking our webpage for future Zoom events. Hopefully sometime before 2030, we'll be able to be back together in the same room. And I'm going to turn it over to Francesca.
Yes, and sign up if you are not members of the society. Also being a member of the society is a great way to donate and support us. Or even if not becoming member, you can sign in to receive information about our next events. So to be included in our database, we'll send an email. Next event in May, we'll talk about art next time. Probably May 9th, but we'll send you emails to confirm from which museum will be connected and the exact day. And so we just want to thank everyone to connect and be with us. And as David was mentioning, we have a gift. Our final farewell piece today is a gift from two musicians, Eva Cappelletti and Philip Chow, who perform at the Kennedy Center Orchestra, and they will play two pieces, Mascagni Cavalleria Rusticana and Nuovo Cinema Paradiso di Ennio Morricone. So I'm sure that everybody will enjoy these two pieces. And with this, we'll say goodbye to the next event.
And I will share my screen so we can see.
Yes, and goodbye from all of us. Claudia, Annalise.
Ciao. Arrivederci.
Goodbye, everyone. We'll enjoy this together still.
Wonderful. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. Oh, there's a second one, sorry.
Ciao.
All right, thank you. All right, thanks everybody. Hope to see you next time. Check out our website and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye-bye.